Hello, this is Giles Halling here with part one of your online champagne course, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all you champagne lovers wherever in the world you happen to be. And without further ado, why don't we get started? And in this section, we're going to be looking at where is champagne and what makes it special. In particular, some of the things that distinguish it from sparkling wine made in other areas, Cava, Prosecco, and others. So, where is Champagne? Well, as we all knew, of course, it's right in the center of the world, and here's the proof in front of your very eyes. It's represented there, Champagne, by that red circle right in the middle with all the arrows pointing at it. And you can see a couple of things from this picture. A, Champagne is just under the 49th parallel north. Now the 49th parallel, both north and south, they're generally accepted to be the limit where you can get grapes to ripen properly and make good wine, and you'll see that most of the wine regions in the world are a little bit further inside those two limits. And the other thing to mention about this map is that you can see on the east of Champagne you've got this huge expanse of land through Eastern Europe, Russia, right across Asia. And what that means is that you get, particularly in winter, very cold blasts of air coming right across from Siberia and really putting the freeze on Champagne. On the other hand, over to the west of France, you've got the Atlantic Ocean, which has a different influence on the climate in Champagne. It brings warmer, wetter weather, more mild weather, and there's a constant playoff between these two influences from east and west, and that's reflected in the different vintages you get in Champagne. And we'll be looking at that in a little bit later on in the course. Let's take a look then at where Champagne is, first of all, in France. And on the left-hand side, you can see that Champagne is roughly 100 kilometers to the east and slightly north of Paris. And then take a look over on the right at the blow-up part of the screen. And you'll see in the northern section of Champagne, you've got three distinct areas. Here in yellow, it's the area called La Côte des Blancs. Then just above that you have the Marne River Valley running from east to west through the Champagne region, and in orange shaded there along the banks of the River Marne you've got another area which not surprisingly is called La Vallée de la Marne, and then just above that, the green horseshoe shaped area, you've got the area called La Montagne de Reims. Now way down at the bottom and separated by at least 100 kilometers, that's 70 miles or so, you've got the fourth area called Aube, the Aube, A-U-B-E. Now if you drew a line around this whole section, right around the extremities, you'd end up with a line about 120 kilometers east to west and north to south. But of course not all that area is planted with vines, much more compact, and you've got roughly in total 34,000 hectares, that's 80,000 odd acres planted with vines. Let's look at that in a bit more detail then. It's only 3% of the French vineyards and a very small section of the total world vineyard, and roughly if you took all the vineyards and condensed them into one square, it'd be about 18 kilometers square. There's some other fascinating things about Champagne, one of which is the most amazing number of people involved in it. And on this slide you can see that there are 15,000 grape growers and nearly 5,000 champagne makers. Now if that seems incredible, remember that a lot of grape growers don't actually make their own champagne. They're quite happy to grow the grapes and sell the grapes onto other people who make the champagne. But even so, I dare say that most of you were surprised to see that there were 5,000 champagne makers. You've probably never heard of most of them. I guess if you could name 10 champagne brands, you'd be doing pretty well. That's pretty average, I would think. If you can name 20, then you're doing really well. And if you can name 30 or more, then you really know something about your champagne. But in fact, there are, as I say, almost 5,000, and later on in the course we'll be introducing you to some of the fantastic champagnes amongst these smaller makers that you can find. But for the time being, take a look at this picture on the right-hand side, and you can see what a patchwork quilt the landscape is in Champagne. All these little nuances of colour and the lines and the roads and the paths mark the boundaries between small plots of vineyard. In actual fact, there are 260,000 odd individual plots of vineyard. Now you can do the calculations yourself, but when you think that there are 34,000 hectares or 80,000 acres, 15,000 grape growers and 260,000 plots of land, you can quickly see that the average size of each plot is tiny indeed, and there are thousands and thousands of them. Now you can see that they take advantage of planting vines anywhere and everywhere where they're allowed to. Right here on the picture on the left, somebody's planted some vines right in the middle of the village between the houses, and it's well worth doing so because you can get from a plot that size several hundred bottles of champagne per year, so it's a useful undertaking. Now let's take a look at the weather in Champagne. Top left hand corner of this slide you can see very frosty in winter. That's the influence from Siberia down to something like -20 this last winter, 2009-2010. On the other hand, on the right of the picture you can see the influence of the Atlantic Ocean bringing lots of rainy days, although it doesn't rain all day, just a drizzle from time to time. And at the bottom of the slide you can see that the average temperature in Champagne is 10.5 degrees centigrade. That's about 51, I believe, Fahrenheit, and that's just enough to get grapes to ripen properly. In the last few years it has been a little bit warmer than that. Is that global warming, or is it a fluctuation that normally takes place every once in a while? Who knows, but it has been a little warmer. Now these extreme weather conditions are actually an advantage for the vine and for growing grapes. You can see from the picture that in winter, bright blue skies, it's very dry, cold, no humidity to speak of, but bitterly cold. And in summer it gets up to the mid-30s centigrade, 40 centigrade on very rare occasions, and that's way over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So you've got these real extremes which put the vine under what's called survival conditions. Now if a vine is happy, then it just carries on producing wood and leaves and wood and leaves, but that's not what you want if you're trying to grow grapes and produce champagne. So that's why growing or planting vines in Champagne produce such a good result. You get lots of fruit. So that's an advantage, this extreme weather we get here. Now the other secret weapon in Champagne that's really important is the chalk. If you walk around in Champagne you'll see that there's a topsoil of 5, 10, 15 centimeters thick, nothing very rich, nothing very thick, but underneath that you've got in some places up to 250 meters of chalk. That's incredible, isn't it? And on the left hand side picture you can see an escarpment of chalk that's above the surface of the road, and that must be 10 meters or more of a chalk cliff just by the side of the road. Chalk is everywhere. You walk through the vineyards. On the right hand side you can see you can just bend down and pick up what's normally considered a stone. Here in Champagne it's a piece of chalk, and you can take it and write on a blackboard with it. Chalk is so important for two particular reasons. It absorbs the heat of the sun during the hot summer days and stores it rather like a radiator, so that when it releases it in the autumn days, as the days get slightly less hot, it nevertheless allows the grapes to continue ripening. The grapes are planted quite low to the ground to take advantage of this stored heat, and that's why you get a late harvest in Champagne right at the end of September or mid-September, and that long ripening period allows the grapes to ripen properly, and without the chalk that wouldn't be possible. The other great thing about the chalk is that it's very porous. The rainwater seeps through it very easily and is stored and gathers in underground sort of reservoirs, which the vine can reach by putting down long roots and absorbing that water even in periods of drought. So that's one of the real secrets of Champagne. You don't get that chalk conditions everywhere else, and certainly not in many places around the world. So to sum up then, just what we've looked at now, we've seen that Champagne is on the limit of the vine growing area. The vines are under difficult conditions, so they produce lots of fruit. It's in a unique geographical location with the conflicting influences of the continental and oceanic weather patterns. An extreme climate allows not only the grapes to ripen in the first place, but the long aging allows more subtle nuances and complexity of flavors and aromas to develop, which you don't get in hotter climates. And it gives a balance of acidity and sugar, and both of those are absolutely crucial to make a good sparkling wine. Last but not least, we looked at the chalk, which allows the grapes to ripen. Without the chalk, that just wouldn't be possible. So that's it for part one. Thank you for listening. In part two, we're going to be looking at Champagne grapes and the Champagne regions. There's lots more to say about that. But for the time being, I hope you enjoyed part one. Join us soon for part two, and thank you very much for listening. This is Giles saying bye-bye. Thanks.